In 1969, Ford built an engine so powerful, so dominant, that racing organizations around the world had to create special rules just to slow it down. They didn't ban it. They couldn't. It was a production engine, built for the streets. So instead, they handicapped it, weighted it down, restricted it. And when that wasn't enough, they killed it. This is that story.
1968. America is in love with power. Every teenager wants a V8. Every muscle car needs one. And Ford, the most American of American car companies, is struggling to keep up. Their Windsor V8, one of the finest engines ever beaten into an American car, was being built as fast as humanly possible. It still wasn't enough. Ford faced a choice every great company eventually faces. Push the existing design further and risk breaking it? Or start over, from scratch, from nothing, and build something the world had never seen? They chose the harder road. Deep inside Ford's Advanced Engines division, a secretive unit some called their Skunk Works, engineers began designing a vehicle that borrowed DNA from two of Ford's most powerful engine families. The agility of the small block, the breathing capacity of the big block? Neither. And both. They named it after the city where it would be born, Cleveland, Ohio.
To understand why the 351 Cleveland terrified its competition, you have to understand what was inside it. On paper, it shared its bore and stroke with Ford's existing 351 Windsor. 4-inch bore, 3.5-inch stroke. But that's where the similarity ended. The Cleveland cylinder heads were a different species entirely. Ford's engineers angled the intake and exhaust valves, canted them in two directions simultaneously. This wasn't decoration, this was physics. Canted valves meant larger valves. Larger valves meant more air. More air meant more fire. More fire meant more power. The intake valves stretched to 2.19 inches wide. The exhaust valves were 1.71 inches. Compare that to the Windsor's 1.85 intake and 1.6 exhaust. At low RPM, you barely notice the difference. But push this engine hard, really hard, and something changed. It didn't run out of breath like every other V8 you'd ever heard. It kept pulling and pulling and pulling. The Cleveland had small block dimensions with big block lungs. It was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and it came in two versions. The two-barrel version, the 2V, cleaned up family cars, Tomasos, Rancheros, Mercury Cougars. It was obedient, reliable, economic, rated at 250 horsepower in 1970 and 71. The engineers gave it just enough of the Cleveland's character to make it smooth. They held back the rest. The 4-barrel version, the 4V, they held nothing back. The M-Code 351 Cleveland arrived in 1970 like a warning shot. High compression pistons, performance camshafts, a square-bore 4-barrel carburetor, valve springs so stiff they could hold back a stampede, 300 horsepower, 380 foot-pounds of torque, an 11-to-1 compression ratio that demanded premium fuel and gave you raw, unfiltered violence in return. Low 15-second quarter miles, straight from the factory floor. Mach 1 Mustangs, high-trim Torinos, Mercury Cougars with murder in their hearts. On the racetracks, the Cleveland was becoming a problem. Not for Ford, for everyone else. Racing organizations were watching, and they didn't like what they saw. But Ford wasn't done yet. In 1971, they built the most savage version of the 351 Cleveland that would ever roll off an assembly line. They called it the Boss 351. Forged domed pistons, compression ratios between 11 and 11.7 to 1. Fords themselves weren't entirely sure which, because they pushed the limits so far. 4-bolt main bearing caps, shot peen connecting rods, solid lifters, adjustable rocker arms, an aluminum intake manifold, ram air induction through a twin scoop hood, 330 horsepower, 370 foot-pounds of torque, quarter-mile times below 14 seconds. On par with Ford's own 429 Cobra jet, an engine twice its displacement. Only 1,806 Boss 351 Mustangs were ever built. Some automotive historians call it Ford's last truly great Mustang of the muscle car era. They're not wrong, because what happened next wasn't Ford's choice. 1972. The Clean Air Act is tightening its grip on Detroit. Lead is being phased out of gasoline. Compression ratios are being forced down. Power ratings are being rewritten. Ford's engineers did everything they could. They lengthened camshaft duration. They changed piston profiles. They tuned and retuned, trying to preserve what they built. 330 gross horsepower became 275 net horsepower. Not a catastrophic drop, but a signal, a warning. The Cleveland was being domesticated. 1973, the Cobra jet variant, stripped of its high compression, its open combustion chambers forced to breathe through ever tighter restrictions, was down to 248 horsepower. 1974, the 351 Cleveland disappeared from the Mustang entirely. Mustang 2 had arrived, smaller, lighter, tamer, powered by a 4-cylinder engine. Ford kept the Cleveland alive in the Torino, the Ranchero, the Cougar. Everyone knew it was over. The engine that had once been restricted by racing organizations for being too powerful was now rated at 255 horsepower. By the end of 1974, it was gone. 5 years, that's all it got. The most advanced small block V8 Ford had ever built, dead at 5 years old. Not because it failed, because the world changed around it. Here's what Ford didn't plan for. The engineers who killed the Cleveland on paper couldn't kill it in the real world. While Ford shut down the Cleveland engine plant, Australia kept building them well into the early 1980s. And Tomaso, the Italian supercar manufacturer, kept sourcing Cleveland engines from Australia for their Pantera sports cars, squeezing the last drops of production out of an engine America had abandoned. On the drag strip, Cleveland-powered cars were still winning races because the engine's fundamental architecture was that good. Jack Roush and other racing engineers turned Cleveland blocks into fire-breathing monsters that made racing organizations nervous all over again. The Cleveland had one known weakness. At sustained high RPM, oil could starve the main bearings, a design quirk in how the oiling system prioritized the camshaft over the crankshaft. A few internal modifications fixed it completely, and once you fixed it, the engine was virtually bulletproof. Today, a properly built 351 Cleveland using modern machining and modern metallurgy can produce over 550 horsepower naturally aspirated. Stroke it out to 408 cubic inches and the number climbs higher still. The engine that the government strangled, the engine that Ford abandoned, the engine that racing organizations feared. It's still here, still running, still winning, still the most underrated V8 Ford ever built. 5 years! That's how long Ford's greatest small block V8 lived on American soil. 5 years! And in that time, it rewrote what a V8 engine could be. Racing organizations handicapped it. Emissions laws strangled it. Corporate decisions buried it. But the Cleveland was never truly killed because great engineering doesn't die. It just waits for people who know what they're looking at. If you've ever heard a 351 Cleveland at full song, you already know what I mean. And if you haven't, now you know where to start.